Hello, and welcome back to the channel. You are about to dive into part 2 of our epic audiobook, The Billionaire Alpha, Forced Me to Marry Him, to Save My Sister. If you are new here and haven't listened to the first 5 chapters, I highly recommend you hit pause and go back to watch part 1 first. The story is full of twists and turns, and you won't want to miss out. The link is waiting for you in the description below. For our amazing returning listeners, if you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another chapter of our thrilling romance stories. Now, for everyone who has been waiting on that cliffhanger, the war has begun and the mate bond is finally real. Let's get back to the story. Chapter 6. The fragile warmth of our new mate bond was instantly extinguished by the icy reality of war. The man who had just looked at me with a flicker of softness was gone, replaced by a cold, strategic alpha, whose eyes saw nothing but the threat at his borders. He ordered me inside with a chilling finality, and for the next 3 days I was once again a prisoner in the obsidian spire. Only this time, my cage was laced with the suffocating tension of impending bloodshed. I refused to be a doll locked away for safekeeping. While Kalen became a ghost, a warlord moving between the war table and the front lines, I found my own battlefield. It was in the pack's infirmary. The first skirmishes with Rorik's Blood Moon pack had been brutal, and the pristine white rooms were now filled with the metallic scent of blood and the low groans of the wounded. The healers were running on fumes, their faces grim. My presence was not welcomed at first. "We have no time for a Luna's charity visit," the head healer snapped, not even looking up from a warrior whose arm was mangled. "I'm not here for a visit," I said, my voice steady as I pulled a roll of clean bandages from a supply cart. "I'm here to work." I spent the next 48 hours doing just that. I cleaned wounds, changed dressings, carried supplies, and held the hands of warriors as they trembled from pain and fear. I had no wolf, no supernatural strength, but I had a resolve forged in desperation. The pack members who had once whispered about the wolfless Omega now watched me with a quiet, grudging respect. They saw me kneel on blood-slicked floors, saw me wipe the sweat from a dying man's brow, and the whispers began to change. I was so lost in the rhythm of my work that I didn't notice him arrive. A sudden, heavy silence fell over the room, and the hairs on my arms stood up. I looked up from the warrior I was tending to and saw Kalen in the doorway. He was covered in dirt and dried blood, his face a mask of exhaustion, but his eyes were locked on me. He wasn't looking at a fragile mate to be protected. He was looking at a leader. And in the depths of his cold, strategic gaze, I saw a flicker of something that stole my breath. Pride. He crossed the room, his powerful presence parting the healers like a ship through water. He stopped before me, his shadow falling over the wounded warrior's cot. He didn't speak, just stared down at me, at my hand stained with the blood of his pack. He reached out, his callous thumb gently wiping a smudge of dirt from my cheek. It was an impossibly tender gesture in the middle of a war zone. "Lyra," he began, his voice rough with an emotion I couldn't name. Before he could continue, the doors to the infirmary burst open. 2 of his guards dragged a captured Blood Moon warrior inside, throwing him to the floor at Kalen's feet. The man was beaten but defiant, his eyes burning with hatred. "Alpha Rorik sends a message," the prisoner spat, a bloody smile twisting his lips. Kalen's jaw tightened, his attention shifting from me to the kneeling man. "Speak it." The warrior's eyes slid to me, a cruel, knowing glint in them. He looked back at my mate, his voice loud enough for the entire room to hear. "The war is over. Our Alpha will recall his forces and swear a truce. He has only one condition." A chilling silence hung in the air. Kalen stared down at him, his stillness more terrifying than any rage. "He wants your new Luna," the warrior snarled. "Give him the wolfless Omega, and your pack will be spared." Chapter 7. The Blood Moon warrior's words fell like stones into a silent pool, and the ripples of their meaning washed over every face in the infirmary. Give him the wolf-less omega. I felt 100 pairs of eyes turn to me, their expressions a sickening mix of pity, calculation, and fear. In that moment, I wasn't their Luna. I was a chess piece, a bargaining chip whose sacrifice could save them all. My breath caught in my chest, the air thick with the unspoken question. Was one life worth the price of peace? Kalen's hand shot out, grabbing the front of the warrior's tunic. He lifted the man effortlessly, his face a mask of pure, murderous rage. "My Luna is not a negotiating term," he snarled, his voice a low promise of death. He shoved the warrior back at his guards. "Take him to the cells. I will deal with him myself." But the poison had already spread. Over the next day, a schism cracked through the Shadow Crest pack. The whispers were no longer about my work in the infirmary. They were about my value. A formal council was called. The influential elders of the pack gathering with Kalen in the war room. I was not invited, but I didn't need to be there to know what was being said. I found out later, from the venomous look Kalen's mother gave me when she stormed out of the meeting. She stopped in front of me in the hall, her eyes cold. "You are a fool if you think his pride is worth more than the lives of this pack. It is a logical trade, a simple practical solution to end a war we did not ask for." Her words were like ice picks, chipping away at the fragile foundation of my newfound place. Was she right? How many warriors would die because Kalen refused to give me up? The weight of that guilt was a crushing burden. That evening, Kalen called for a full pack assembly in the great hall. He stood on a raised dais, his presence so commanding that the room crackled with energy. He pulled me to his side, his hand gripping mine in a gesture that was both possessive and reassuring. He looked out over the faces of his people, the wounded, the fearful, the resentful, and he spoke, his voice thundering with absolute authority. "Alpha Rorik has given us an ultimatum," Kalen began, his gaze sweeping the crowd. "He believes we are weak. He believes we can be fractured. He believes that the life of our Luna is a price we are willing to pay for peace." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Some among you agree with him." He glanced toward the elders, his mother included. "They see a logical trade, but leadership is not about logic alone. It is about honor. It is about strength. It is about our soul." He raised our joined hands for all to see. "This is my mate, your Luna. An attack on her is an attack on the soul of this pack." His voice dropped to a furious growl that vibrated through the floor. "We will not surrender our soul. We will fight. We will bleed. And we will send the Blood Moon pack back to their gods in pieces. There will be no more talk of trades. There is only war." A roar of support erupted from the warriors, drowning out the murmurs of dissent. In that moment, he cemented our union. He chose me publicly and without hesitation over the easy path. But I could see in the hard set of the elders' jaws that he had also united his enemies against him. Later that night, in the quiet of his study, the weight of his decision settled around us. He stood before the fireplace, his back to me. "It isn't just about honor, Lyra," he said quietly, his voice heavy. "There's something I haven't told you." He turned to face me, his eyes dark with a fear I had never seen in him before. "Rorik is more than a brute. He's a collector of rarities, of ancient bloodlines with unique powers. I never looked into your ancestry. It didn't matter to me. But a wolfless omega is a genetic anomaly." He took a step closer, his gaze intense. "I am beginning to think your wolfless state isn't a weakness, Lyra. I fear it's a sign of something else entirely, something he knows about you that we don't." Chapter 8. Kalen's words haunted my every waking moment, a chilling whisper that reframed my entire existence. I was no longer just a wolfless omega. I was a question mark, a genetic secret that a brutal alpha was willing to start a war to possess. The fear was a cold knot in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by a new, terrifying paranoia. If Rorik knew something about me, it meant my bloodline was a liability, a weakness he could exploit. That weakness was turned into a weapon against us less than a week later. Kalen, emboldened by his pack's renewed loyalty, planned a daring counteroffensive. He would lead a small elite force to strike at the Blood Moon supply lines in the Deadwood Gorge, a swift, punishing blow to cripple their advance. The plan was known only to his inner circle, his most trusted generals. I didn't see the attack, I felt it. I was in the infirmary organizing supplies when a wave of collective panic washed through the fortress. I couldn't hear the mind links, but I saw the color drain from the faces of the guards. I saw healers drop what they were doing and sprint towards the entrance. It was a disaster, an ambush. The wounded began to flood in, their numbers far greater than we had anticipated. The stories they told between ragged, pain-filled breaths were all the same. Rorik's forces weren't just waiting for them, they were dug in, armed with silver-laced weapons, positioned with a strategic perfection that could only come from having Kalen's own battle plans. And then I saw him. 4 of his strongest warriors carried him in, their faces streaked with tears of rage and grief. Kalen was unconscious, his body pale and still. A deep, jagged wound tore across his chest, its edges blackened and refusing to heal. Silver. A poison to our kind and a near-certain death sentence, even for an alpha as powerful as him. The world narrowed to a single point of unbearable pain. The head healer rushed forward, but I waved him off, my voice a low command I didn't recognize. "Leave us." He hesitated, but something in my eyes made him nod and clear the room. I was alone with my mate, my alpha, the man who had bought me, caged me, and then chosen me over the safety of his entire pack. The thought of him dying, of the world continuing without his infuriating, powerful presence, was a physical agony. Tears streamed down my face as I knelt beside him, placing my hands over his wound. I had no healing power, no magic to offer. I had nothing but the desperate, frantic energy of our new mate bond. I closed my eyes and poured every ounce of my love, my fear, and my will to live into my touch. "Don't you dare leave me," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You don't get to save me and then die, Kalen. I forbid it." A strange warmth bloomed under my palms, startling me. It wasn't my warmth. It felt ancient, a soft golden light that I could see even through my closed eyelids. The light flowed from me into him, and I felt the frantic, ragged rhythm of his heart begin to slow, to steady. The blackened edges of the wound began to recede, the flesh slowly, impossibly, stitching itself back together. It wasn't just soothing his pain, I was healing him. As his breathing evened out into a deep, stable rhythm, the adrenaline receded, and a chilling clarity took its place. The ambush, the silver weapons, the perfect intel. My gaze drifted from Kalen's peaceful face to the locked door of the infirmary, and the pieces clicked into place with horrifying certainty. Rorik hadn't outsmarted Kalen. He hadn't been lucky. He had been told. The chilling realization washed over me, colder than any fear I had felt before. We were not just fighting a war against the Blood Moon pack. We were hunting a snake in our own home. Chapter 9. The knowledge of a traitor in our midst was a poison that seeped into the very stones of the obsidian spire. While Kalen recovered, his strength returning at a startling rate thanks to whatever power I had unlocked, a new, chilling paranoia gripped the pack. Every shadow held a potential enemy. Every friendly glance was suspect. Kalen, confined to his study, began a quiet, ruthless investigation, his face a mask of cold fury. His mission was to hunt the snake. Mine was to find out why I was the snake's target. I sought out Elias, the pack's elderly historian, and one of the few who had always treated me with a gentle kindness. I found him in the archives, a cavernous, dust-filled library in the deepest part of the fortress, where the air smelled of aging paper and forgotten secrets. When I explained my strange healing ability and Kalen's fears about my bloodline, his ancient eyes widened not with shock, but with dawning, fearful recognition. "There are legends," he rasped, his voice thin as parchment, "stories dismissed as myth, of omegas born without a wolf, not as a weakness, but because their human soul was too strong, too complete. They were said to possess a different kind of power." For hours we delved into crumbling scrolls and leather-bound tomes that hadn't been opened in centuries. We pieced together fragmented histories, whispers of a forgotten lineage. Finally, Elias's trembling finger landed on a passage in a book bound in faded silver. The script was ancient, the ink barely visible. "Here," he breathed, his voice filled with awe, "the Nexus Omega." The text described a rare bloodline whose members acted as a fulcrum for werewolf power. It said they could connect to the spiritual heart of the pack, the Nexus, and through it influence the wolves around them. They could amplify their mate's strength and senses, making him an unstoppable force. They could nullify an enemy's rage, calming them into submission. And in the most extreme cases, the legend claimed they could perform the ultimate act, severing a werewolf's connection to their inner wolf, leaving them a powerless, broken human. A cold dread washed over me. I wasn't a prize for Rorik to claim as a mate. I was a weapon, a living, breathing tool he could use to build an invincible army and destroy his enemies. My entire life, my greatest shame, my lack of a wolf, was actually the source of a terrifying, unimaginable power. I returned to Kalen's study with the heavy weight of this new reality pressing down on me. The atmosphere in the spire had grown even more tense. I could feel the invisible threads of Kalen's investigation tightening around the pack. He looked up as I entered, his face grim. The investigation had clearly taken its toll. "I know what I am," I told him, my voice shaking as I explained what Elias and I had found. The look on his face shifted from grim to fiercely protective. "Then we know why he wants you," he said, his voice a low growl. "And I think I know who is helping him get you." He pushed a small, encrypted data drive across his massive desk. "Our communications are monitored, but the traitor made a mistake. They used an old, supposedly defunct channel to send a message 2 days before the ambush." He paused, his jaw tightening until the muscle bulged. "The message was sent to an untraceable account, but the channel itself, only 3 people in this pack have the clearance codes to access it. Myself, my head general, and my mother." He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw a flash of pure, heartbreaking pain. The general was by my side in the gorge, which leaves one suspect. He pushed the drive closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "My mother." Chapter 10. The name hung in the air between us, a devastating weight of betrayal. My mother. The words echoed with Kalen's own heartbreak, and I saw the raw pain behind his cold alpha mask. His mother, the woman who despised me, who saw me as a worthless omega, was the suspected traitor who had nearly gotten him killed. The logical, strategic part of my brain saw the opportunity, the weakness we could exploit. The part of me that was now bound to him simply ached for his pain. "If she is the leak," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "then let's give her something to leak." Kalen's head snapped up, his icy eyes locking onto mine. I saw the immediate protest warring with the cold calculation of a warlord. "Absolutely not. I will not use you as bait, Lyra. The risk is too great." "The risk of doing nothing is greater," I countered, stepping closer to his desk. "The traitor is in your inner circle. We can't plan a single move without them knowing. This war will be lost through 1,000 cuts unless we cut the head off the snake." I placed my hands on his desk, leaning forward, my gaze unwavering. You and I are the only two people in this entire fortress who know the truth of my power. Let's use it. Let me be the bait. For a long, tense moment, he just stared at me, his jaw working. The alpha in him screamed to protect his mate, but the strategist saw the brutal logic of my plan. It was a terrifying gamble, a wild card that Rorik would never see coming. It relied on my unknown abilities, but more than that, it relied on my absolute, unshakable trust in him. Finally, he gave a single sharp nod. The plan was as simple as it was dangerous. Kalen called a meeting of his war council. He announced, his voice ringing with feigned desperation, that our historian had discovered a secret ritual. At the next full moon, our Luna, the Nexus Omega, would perform a rite at the ancient stone circle on the western ridge. The ritual, he claimed, would amplify the strength of our entire pack, making our warriors invincible. It was a lie wrapped in a legend, designed to be an irresistible target for Rorik. The head general looked grim, but nodded his assent. The other elders murmured, seeing a spark of hope. But Kalen's mother reacted with furious, undisguised outrage. "You would risk her on the word of a dusty scroll?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the room. "You would send our Luna, the key to our future, to an undefended landmark on a fool's errand? This is madness, Kalen. It will get her killed. And you will lose this war." Her words, filled with what sounded like genuine, desperate fear, had the opposite effect on the council. They exchanged dark looks. To them, it was the clearest sign of guilt. The traitor, trying to sabotage the one plan that could save them all. On the night of the full moon, I dressed in a simple white gown, the ceremonial attire Elias had suggested to make the ruse more believable. Kalen met me at the edge of the woods. He didn't speak, but his eyes were a storm of conflict, of fear and a burning pride. He placed a hand on my cheek, his thumb stroking my skin in a gesture that was both a promise and a goodbye. "I will be there. I will not let you fall." The words passed between us through the silent language of our bond. I turned and walked into the forest alone, the path lit by the eerie silver light of the moon. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt of fear through me. But I kept walking, my steps steady. I was no longer the scared Omega who had traded her life for her sister's. I was the Luna of the Shadow Crest pack, a willing sacrifice walking into a trap of her own design. Chapter 11. I stepped into the center of the stone circle, the ancient monoliths like silent, sleeping giants under the full moon. The bait was set. I closed my eyes, feigning a meditative state, my heart hammering against my ribs as I waited for the trap to spring. The silence of the forest was unnatural, a held breath before a scream. It broke with the rustle of a dozen leaves at once, and I opened my eyes to find myself surrounded. Rorik's elite warriors emerged from the shadows, their forms shifting from man to wolf, their eyes glowing with predatory hunger. Alpha Rorik himself stepped into the clearing, a cruel, triumphant smirk on his face. "The Nexus Omega," he gloated, his voice a low growl. "A legend come to life. Did you really think your Alpha would let you come here alone?" As if on cue, a single powerful howl echoed through the gorge. Kalen's signal. The world exploded into chaos. Shadow Crest warriors erupted from the trees, a wave of disciplined fury crashing against Rorik's forces. The clearing became a whirlwind of snarling wolves and flashing claws. I stayed in the center of the circle, a statue in a hurricane, my eyes searching for Kalen. I saw him near the edge of the battle, a whirlwind of death in his massive wolf form, and he was heading for his mother. She was cowering behind a stone, and he shifted back to his human form, his face a mask of cold fury as he confronted her. "Why?" was the only word he snarled. "I didn't betray you," she cried, her voice raw with terror and a desperate sincerity. "I was trying to save you. I contacted Rorik's Beta to negotiate a peace treaty behind your back. I was afraid your love for her would make you reckless, that you would lose." Before Kaelin could process her words, a figure moved behind him. General Marcus, his most trusted commander. "She speaks the truth," the general said, his voice laced with a chilling disappointment. He drew a silver dagger. "But her fears were justified. Your father would never have risked this pack for a girl." My blood ran cold. The general. He was the traitor. He lunged not at Kaelin, but at his own alpha, his face twisted with a misguided sense of loyalty. The betrayal was a brutal, shocking blow, but the immediate threat was Rorik. Seeing Kaelin distracted, the Blood Moon Alpha cut a bloody path through the battle directly towards me. "The weapon is mine!" he roared. Kaelin intercepted him, a blur of motion. The two alphas crashed into each other, a cataclysm of power and rage. They shifted, their wolf forms a terrifying spectacle of snapping jaws and tearing claws. It was a battle of gods, brutal and absolute. I watched, helpless, as Kaelin fought with the strength of 10 men, but Rorik was a savage, relentless, and without honor. He gained the upper hand, his claws digging into Kaelin's shoulder, forcing him to the ground. Rorik pinned him, jaws dripping with saliva, poised for the killing bite that would sever Kaelin's throat. Time stopped. The sounds of the battle faded into a dull roar. The only thing in the world was Kaelin, my mate, about to die. A fire ignited inside me, a supernova of terror and love. I didn't think, I didn't plan. I acted. I raised my hands and screamed, but no sound came out. Instead, a wave of pure, silent energy erupted from my soul, washing over the clearing. It wasn't a healing warmth. It was a profound and terrifying unraveling. Rorik's killing lunge stopped. He froze, a look of utter shock and horror contorting his massive wolf face. He let out a choked, agonized sound, not of pain, but of loss. I felt it. A spiritual cord connecting him to his inner wolf, and I pulled. I ripped it away from him, severing the very source of his power, his rage, his identity. He collapsed, his body violently shifting and shrinking back into the form of a man. He lay on the ground, gasping, no longer an alpha, no longer a wolf. He was just a man, staring up at me with eyes full of a terror far worse than death, stripped bare of the beast he once was. Chapter 12. A stunned, absolute silence descended upon the battlefield. The sounds of fighting died, replaced by the collective, disbelieving gasp of two armies. Rorik, the savage alpha of the Blood Moon Pack, was no more. In his place was a whimpering, powerless man, staring up at me in abject terror. The energy I had unleashed retreated, leaving me dizzy and shaking, my heart pounding with the terrifying magnitude of what I had done. Kaelin rose, wounded but alive, his eyes finding mine across the clearing with an expression of pure, unadulterated awe. He walked over to the broken man on the ground. He didn't kill Rorik. That would have been a mercy. Instead, he delivered a cold, final judgment that was far crueler. You will live out your days in a silver cell, remembering the wolf you once were. A man who started a war for a power he could never hope to control. The war was over. The remaining Blood Moon warriors, their alpha broken, surrendered immediately. General Marcus, the true traitor, was brought before Kaelin in chains. His justice was swift and absolute. He was stripped of his rank and banished, cast out to live as a lone wolf, the ultimate shame for a pack warrior. In the silent aftermath, as the healers tended to the wounded, the members of the Shadowcrest pack parted for me. They no longer saw a wolfless Omega. They saw the Luna who had saved them. Their reverence was a heavy, unfamiliar weight. Kaelin's mother approached me, her proud face humbled, her eyes filled with a shame that was profound. "I saw you as a weakness," she said, her voice barely a whisper, a price to be paid. But you are the heart of this pack's strength. She bowed her head. Can you forgive me? I looked at the woman who had caused me so much pain, and I felt nothing but a quiet sense of peace. There is nothing to forgive, I said, and I meant it. We had all been forged into something new by the fires of this war. Weeks passed. The wounds of our pack began to heal, both the physical and the spiritual. The obsidian spire, once my gilded cage, slowly started to feel like a home. The whispers that followed me now were not of disdain, but of wonder. The story concludes on a cool, clear evening. I stood beside Kaylin on the grand balcony overlooking our territory. The land was peaceful, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. My life of forced servitude felt like a distant memory, a story that had happened to someone else. Kaylin took my hand, his touch now gentle, familiar. I brought you here as a possession, he said quietly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. A solution to a problem. I saw you as a key to unlock a cure. I leaned my head against his shoulder, my heart full. And I saw you as a monster, a ruthless cage I had to endure. He turned, his icy eyes now warm with a love that was deep and unwavering. We were both wrong. He lifted my hand, pressing his lips to my knuckles. You are not my possession, Lyra. You are my partner, my equal. I looked out at our home, at the pack that was now truly ours. He was the alpha of power, the unbreakable shield of his people. And I, the girl who was born without a wolf, had finally understood. I was the alpha of heart, the unwavering soul of his. Together, we were no longer just mates, but two halves of a single spirit, ready to lead our people into the dawn of a new day. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed watching Lyra and Kaylin's story unfold and want more epic romance and high-stakes drama, please show your support by hitting that subscribe button. And if you have a friend who can't get enough of powerful alphas and the strong mates who challenge them, do them a favor and share this story with them. It helps our pack grow more than you know. Until the next chapter, thank you for listening.